So I came up with 5 reasons that why we need inpatient care in 2024. So I'll take you through my reasoning and some data that supports that. So greetings to everyone from our home base in New Haven. My disclosures: I'm thrilled to say that the second edition of our textbook was published with the help of many of the speakers and presenters and thinkers from this group, and I'm really very grateful for everyone's contributions and thrilled to bring this forward into reality. So thanks very much for taking a look at it. So we've heard, that repeatedly all total joints are outpatient. We've heard this said over and over. The hospital repeats it, the insurance companies say it. But the fact is, reason number one, not all total joints can be performed at an ambulatory surgery center. We heard Dr. Kreutzer this morning talk about 13% of his population is not a candidate for his surgical center criteria. These are our Yale exclusion criteria. And I don't think many of us would argue, BMI over 50 or someone who had a heart attack within a few months, we're not going to operate in them, as a first step. But certainly our anesthesiologists have very strict criteria about who can and cannot come to an outpatient procedure at Yale. This is not just for total joints, this is for all different things. But we look at those patients with severe systemic disease, the ASA 3 and 4, as Stefan mentioned, and we see that there's things like morbid obesity, BMI over 40, hepatitis, alcohol dependence, implanted pacemaker. How many of your patients have a pacemaker and all of a sudden you can't go to the outpatient setting? Moderate reduction of ejection fraction. How many patients have a little bit of CHF, ESRD, so renal history, or history more than 3 months of heart attack, stroke, TIA, or CAD? What percentage of your patients have a history of a CAD, a stent, more than 3 months ago? In our center, they can't go outpatient. So this is a pretty significant number of patients. These are patients in the last few months. As I planned this talk, I thought about my patients. I take care of a lot of patients with severe illness at a tertiary medical center. We have a big hematology oncology practice at the Smilow Cancer Center. We see a ton of patients with hemophilia, von Willebrand's disease, CLL, myeloma, metastatic disease. Okay, we have a ton of patients in our renal transplant and renal disease program that have CKD 3 or 4. They're on peritoneal or hemodialysis. They're kidney transplanted with solid organ transplant. Many patients, of course, in all of our practices have coronary artery disease. Stenting with reduced EF, well, what's a reduction that would qualify you for outpatient? We don't know. It's not defined. History of a stroke in the past. What about someone who has a history of a stroke with hemiparesis that doesn't walk well? Should we say no to them? Systematic disease, advanced age, moderate Parkinson's. We have a whole program now with deep brain stimulators for patients having Parkinson's disease. Type 1 diabetes, moderate to severe cirrhosis, or even mild to moderate, or obesity. What's your cutoff? Do you have a cutoff? We'll talk about that. So reason number 2, the fact is that not all total joints are being performed as an outpatient. So we know the rule change took place for total knee in 2018 and total hip in 2020, and this was the forecast at that time. It didn't say on the far right 2028, it didn't say 100% we're going to be outpatient. Even the SG2 forecaster said 43% would still be inpatient in 2028. So we looked at a study of total knees after the rule change, and we found that while, yes, the percentage went up from 2017 to 2018, still the overwhelming majority, 82%, were coded as an inpatient, and only 4.6% had actual length of stay 0 in the NISQIP database for total knee. So we saw this in this trend continue not just for Medicare, but also for those under 65. So we went back with some data science and looked at what happened with total hips, and we've submitted this data. It's out there in review. So we looked at 2018-19. There was a much faster uptake after the IPO rule change in 2020, and we see that the number of outpatient hips in 2020 went to 54%. Visually, it looks like these. These are the 2 curves for hips. So there was a much faster uptake for total hip to transition to outpatient. But still, even so, there's still a very significant number of individuals who are being done in the United States as inpatient. This is not who we think should be inpatient. This is the actual data of practice in the United States. It's not 100% outpatient. So how about reason number 3? Patient selection for ambulatory surgery center is problematic, or in some ways, looking at this, highly problematic, at least at the outset. This was a New York database looking at the NISQOR database, which is a New York State only. And in 2019, they went up to 11% after the rule change for total knee from 8%. So still, a huge percentage were being done as an inpatient in total in New York State. The problem becomes when you look at the subgroups of the population: Hispanic, Black patients, female patients, and Medicaid patients tended not to be invited or asked or booked as an outpatient as frequently as Caucasian patients, for what that's worth. And so there is a problem there. And there's also a problem when you look by disease subcategory, that all the boxes in reds are significant, where they were much less likely to be performed as an outpatient. So there's a major selection bias that was occurring in New York State. Now, this is the 1 year at the beginning of the transition. Now, this may look different now, but this was a problem as we moved, that first move towards outpatient surgery. And the bottom we have obesity, and the same thing, those were patients were less likely to have outpatient surgery. So let's talk about obesity, shall we? This was just the New York Times. For those of you on the East Coast who you hear the news, the New York Times just ran an article on September 6th, an agonizing dilemma, and quoted a number of total joint surgeons and AAHKS members in this article. But they said in the article on the right, less than half of orthopedic surgeons in a survey said they would operate on a patient with a BMI over 40. Not operate inpatient, but operate on them at all. And 22 million American adults fall into this category. Only 11% of surgeons would operate on someone who had a BMI over 50. And over 55, they would be rejected almost everywhere. So this is becoming a major issue, if you're not aware of it, that we are being perceived as discriminatory against patients with obesity. So we went back in the data science group and looked at this. The influence of high BMI on outpatient total hip arthroplasty rates, in fact, didn't have a big impact on the outpatient arthroplasty rate. And you can see in our table on the right that patients with obesity were still being done over the last few years at a very similar category rate as those with less obesity. What about outpatient total hip joint arthroplasty and safety? What about that? Well, actually, there's not a major difference. But the outpatient total hip group in the obese category had lower odds of 90-day complications. So actually, it may be actually beneficial. It may be beneficial to operate on the obese patient in the outpatient setting and counsel them and optimize them and get them home. So reason number 5, inpatient setting is absolutely and fundamentally critical to our well-being in orthopedic surgery as a profession. Our surgery residents and arthroplasty fellows at Yale, they want to come and train in high-volume arthroplasty centers. They want to see a high percentage of complex revision and complex primary arthroplasty case volumes. So the question I would pose is, who will manage those revisions? Who will manage the periprosthetic fractures? Who will manage the PJIs and the sepsis and the unexpected complications that show up every day and every week in our center? Well, they're going to be managed in the inpatient setting, and that's where we're training our next generation. I'm pleased to show a picture with Mohammed Padella. He's in the room, our fellow from Yale this year. He's joining us here at the conference in our class of 2024, and some alumni that we have. These folks all trained, as did you, in an inpatient arthroplasty center, and there's a reason for that. So I think we have a fundamental ethical responsibility to our community, to our trainees, and to our profession. And I think the ideal balance for us, for me anyway, as a professional, is to have some access to the outpatient setting, some access to the inpatient setting, and be able to take care of patients in both settings, and therefore accountable to 100% of the patients I serve. So in summary, why do we still need hospitals and inpatient units for total joints? Well, at least a year after the rule changes, the majority of cases were still being done as an inpatient in 2018, and a very significant number of total hips in the United States are still being done as an inpatient, at least as of 2021. So we don't want to discriminate against access for those patients. I think we should offer the patient care to the broadest aspect of our community and to society, and I think we have to be very mindful that ASCs may select cases out into the detriment of certain populations of women, Hispanics, African Americans, and Medicaid patients. It may select against patients with medical comorbidities and rare disorders, and patients with BMI and high BMIs, obesity and high BMIs. And this exacerbates disparities in arthroplasty care, and I think we should just be mindful. I'm not saying anyone in the room is intentionally creating a disparity, but we have to be mindful of the reality of our practices and the implications of our decision making. Hospitals, again, last point, is where we train residents and arthroplasty fellows, whom we are very proud of, and everyone here trained in a hospital, not just in an ASC setting, and I think that's part of our duty to society and to the future of our profession, and I hope that you'll agree. So thank you very much.